So it's interesting.
Hi, everybody. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Short-Term Rental Task Force at 3 p.m. on Wednesday, May 4th, 2023. And welcome, everybody, and thank you for joining us either in person or on Zoom. And the clerk will call roll.
Anderson,
Here.
Vance,
Here.
Stanton,
Here.
Steele,
Here.
Pitgali,
Here.
Grandma,
Here.
Hart,
Here.
Here, Clark.
Here.
Great, thank you. The first thing we do is take a look at and if there are no changes, approve the agenda. Anybody have any changes or concerns with the agenda? Nope. Would somebody like a motion to make a motion to approve it?
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mann, second by Stanton. We don't have any minutes, so we don't need to approve those. Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. Good reminder. All in favor of approving the agenda?
Yes.
Any opposed? Great, thanks. Okay, so no minutes. We're going to skip that. Just to orient us to the agenda, so there are two places where people can make comments. We're going to have one in just a few minutes, and those are for comments that are on agenda items. So anything you see on the agenda, you can make a comment up to 3 minutes and ask people in the room to come to the podium and say your name and where you're from. And those on Zoom will get to you as well. And then toward the end of the meeting, we'll have another session where people can make comments, and you can make comments on anything related to short-term rentals at that point. So if it's not on the agenda, save your comments for later. But we'll begin. Why don't we begin with the room? And if there's anybody here in the room that wants to make a comment, come on up. All right. Anybody on Zoom? Raise your hand on Zoom. Okay. Yes. Take you off mute. You're up.
All right, thank you. I just wanted to, as this meeting on the agenda is about your way to move forward and how you're going to move forward and what your task is going to be. I just wanted to relate that when this concept of the task force came through first, I was asked by a friend of mine why I would become involved in such a thing. He said, you know, they've already decided what they're going to do. And I said, no, I've read about it. I've seen who they're going to be the people they want on the committee. And it looks like they're going to be very fair and even-handed and not have a preconceived notion of what they're going to do. And I'm just hoping that that's going to hold true and that people will not already have an idea in their head of what they want to do or what they want to stop or what they want to go forward, but they would really open-mindedly look at the issues before them, not judge short-term rentals as a bad thing. Historically, we know that we are a resort community. We want people to come here. We want people who want to rent homes and to stay here. And I think that's very important. And when people say that short-term rentals might be hurting our neighborhoods and whatnot, I think we have to look at the community as a whole. We have to see that we're not just the city of Saugatuck, which truly is a resort town, but we're the township, we're the city of Douglas, and that's where we round out our neighborhoods. That's where there are going to be the places for family and places that people support our schools. One comment that was made by one of the city council members that kind of disturbed me a little bit was that he was equating our housing in the city of Saugatuck with our natural resources. And he said that basically we have to manage the housing like we manage our waterfront. I have to disagree with that. As a realtor, one thing that we are taught about private property rights is that when a person purchases a property, it comes with what legally we call a bundle of rights. And I'm going to quote from what we learned from like our first class in real estate. It says, the bundle of rights is the common term in the United States for the collection of legal rights that are granted to property owners upon purchase and receipt of a title to a piece of real estate. These property rights include possession, control, exclusion, deprivation of income, that means being able to receive income, and disposition. And I hope that as we look at these things that are before you, whether we need to or we don't need to strengthen our ordinance, or if we have to have certain things changed, that we recognize we have to respect these personal private property rights. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom? Jamie, I can't read the names from here. Lou?
He's on mute.
Lou, you're on mute.
I was trying to unmute. Thanks. I got 3 minutes.
Yes.
Okay. Lou Wessel, I live on the hill. Very strategic point. I've got a short-term rental on my left, on my right, behind me, across the street. The house that I'm living in full-time, I've been here 5 years, but before it was a short-term rental, so I've seen both sides of it. But I clearly have a dog in the fight now and some strong opinions, and just wanted to share my thoughts on an overview basis. As much as there are some problems with short-term rentals, I am against a ban or restrictions on short-term rentals as far as a cap for 2 reasons. First, even taking the law into effect, first, to retroactively ban someone from renting who purchased their house as a rental would be patently unfair. And I'm not even sure it could be done. Second, to allow some houses to be short-term rental and not others, it would create by definition a 2-tier system that will severely reduce the value of homes that cannot be rented. I was at a presentation where a local realtor said that an assessor had been hired to determine how much that would be, and came up with the number of 30% that would reduce the value of a house that could not be rented. I am for higher fees on rentals and much more vigilant control over the behavior of renters and related parking issues. I would like this committee to come up with a list of expectations for renters, noise regulations, alcohol consumption outside the house, animal-related regulations, parking, etc., that will be required to be prominently posted in each short-term rental home. And perhaps a rental contract should be required for each short-term renter that includes this list of expectations and or requirements. I would like each car parked on the hill to be required to display a hang tag or a decal. Last year, there were a number of days where there is no way a fire truck could have ever gotten to my house. So to me, it is a true public safety issue. I would like higher fees to fund a robust compliance effort on the above, including a full-time, at least for the summer, compliance officer. And as part of that compliance effort, short-term owners should be subject to significant financial penalties in the case of abusive renters. My guess is that with that, short-term rental owners will be requiring significant security deposits for their renters, which I think is a good thing. Habitual abusers, I think they should just lose their privileges for the season. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else on Zoom? Okay. Well, that will wrap up public comments. So that takes us to agenda number 5, review and discussion. And we thought, since this is the first meeting and many of us don't know each other, we just kind of go around the room and introduce ourselves, talk a little bit about why you were interested in being on the short-term rental committee or task force, sort of what you're hoping for from it. If you're so inclined, what you love about Saugatuck and why you're here. And so we'll go through the task force. Also want to go to the city staff and to our planning consultant who is sitting next to Ryan. So Ann, do you want to kick us off? Would you kick us off?
Sure. My name is Ann Goodith. I've been here in town. My parents moved over here in 1978 over on Lake Shore. So been part of the community for quite some time. Oh, okay, sorry. I am currently working at Jakeway Vacation Rentals and Property Management, heading up their vacation program. I'm also currently taking real estate license classes. So hopefully I'll get that under my belt shortly. And I've been part of the community for quite some time. And we finally moved back full time. So I'm happy to be here.
Great. Steve?
Thanks, Holly. Many of you I know, I'm Steve Manns. I actually chair the Planning Commission for the city of Saugatuck and was interested in being on the task force because last year when we were looking at our 2023 priorities and strategies that we wanted to at least address to be more proactive from a planning commission versus reactive with only taking in consideration of things that come into us. By being more proactive, we decided that we wanted to try to take a look at what the community, things the community had asked us to kind of take a look at. One of which was short-term rentals. Not saying that there's anything, there's no perceived notion, in this task force or of it being on our agenda for 2023. It was like just the fact we wanted to be able to start to look at it, evaluate it and see is it operating the way that we would want it to as a community now, as well as where we want the community to be 5 and 10 years from now. We also, as many people are aware, we have other things on the agenda like the waterfront. That was also something else that's very important that we put that we're going to proactively be looking at this summer. So these are type of examples of things that we planning commission wanted to be involved with. Instead of us taking it on ourselves, and I think it's been discussed, and Ryan may go into this on the next topic, it was really determined that we wanted to make it more of a community type of event versus just the planning commission and city council kind of going back and reviewing this and taking it to the public. And that's why the decision was made to kind of form the overall task force. And I thank Holly and other members of the planning commission as well as city council for kind of seeing the benefit of having this task force in place so that we get the opinions from all different parts of the community. I live on the Peninsula West Side. I think, it has a very different feel than what you do in the downtown area. And it's something that I wanted to be able to kind of represent, those who are on that side of our city. I know we have the beach and everything over there, but it's definitely a different feel than what you have when you're here downtown or on the hill. With that, I think I probably have said enough.
Great. Kathy?
Thanks. I'm Kathy Hart. I've lived here in town for 22 years. My husband and I first bought a house up on the hill, decided that we wanted to continue to live here and retire here in Saugatuck. Knowing that it was the town that it was, we were surrounded on the hill as well by many, many rentals. And we had a great time there on the hill, but we bought another house later down on Lake Street. So we've experienced a couple of different areas, I guess, within the town as to how short-term rentals are conducted. And Lake Street is mostly many short-term rentals, condos, very, very heavy on that. I decided to volunteer for this committee because I wanted to see that we, as a town, didn't kind of go overboard based on loudness or the number of people that were saying things have to change or things have to be different, that we try to solve the problems that are out there that are presented to us and not kind of overstretch. That was my point.
Hi, everyone. My name's Joe Clark. I live up on the hill. Seems a lot of us do. I've been a full-time resident in Saugatuck now for 13, 14 years. Property owner for almost 30 years. Deep family roots in the community. My family's been coming up here for 3 generations now from St. Louis. Still have lots of family that have property in the area. 2 sisters that have moved here, cousins, nephews. So deep ties. I asked to be on the task force because one, I have a passion for this town. I love this town. I was brought here the week I was born from Chicago. My mother brought me up here and spent the summers as a kid. And my dad, it was always his dream to retire up here, and he didn't live long enough to do that. So I'm filling in his shoes. And in terms of the short-term rental, we all have our own opinions. My hope here is that, we've got the best of the best here and we can help shape some policy that makes sense for the town and in the town's best interest. It's a very polarizing topic, depending on who you talk to, and I've talked to a lot of people. So I'm hoping that we can focus on, a lot of objective criteria. There's no way not to get into some of the subjective criteria. I'm a firm believer that too much of a good thing is never a good thing. I think we've all seen that throughout our lives and, so you'll find me not trying to shut down short-term rentals or anything like that, but at the same time, turning it into a free-for-all and, watching the residency rate in our town go down. I'm not sure that's a good thing either. So I hope we can find some middle ground and that everybody will either be equally unhappy or happy. And, whatever we recommend that and whatever gets adopted by the council ultimately is in the best interest of this city. So looking forward to working with everyone.
Great. Thanks, Joe. I'm Holly Anderson, and I've had the great pleasure in my life of living all over the country. And I moved to Saugatuck 5 years ago and was at home. I mean, I walked into the house I bought and said, "This is my house," and I love it here. I was interested in short-term rentals. One, because I stay in short-term rentals when I travel, and I love that. I love the being in a house and being able to cook and feeling like I'm in a neighborhood. And I also know that tourism is so important to this community that we have to make it work. And I also live in a neighborhood. I live on the Peninsula West as well. I'm in sort of a 16-house little neighborhood. And in the 5 years I've been there, we've gone from 2 short-term rentals to 4. And I miss my neighbors. I really do miss my neighbors and having neighbors. And then, the other issues that crop up. But that said, we need short-term rentals. So I wanted to be on the task force because I'm an open-minded and fair person. And I think this is going to be hard for all of us to work through. And I think though I have learned so much so far. And I'm a big believer that we need to listen to each other to learn and listen to each other to understand, and then look at the big picture and what's good for Saugatuck and how can we help move that forward. So that's why I'm here. Kevin.
My name's Kevin Tringali. I am been in the Saugatuck Douglas area for nearly 25 years. Very active in the community. Love our school system here. Very involved in our schools. Have a daughter, but at both the elementary school and the high school. And I'm also the owner of Bella Vita Vacation Rentals. Probably have owned that for about 15 years. And, a big part of me wanting to be a part of this is share my experiences on being a good neighbor and helping, come to those common grounds that people have mentioned. And I believe, like the speaker said, just have some compliance and make things work. I'm very proud of the fact that Bella Vita has been good neighbors. And I think that's important that we respect these neighbors that do live here. And so I feel like with this experience, I can bring something to the table in terms of just helping make this work for both sides as best as possible.
Elizabeth Forma, moved here 18 years ago. I live up on the hill. I have 2 boys that both graduated from Saugatuck High School. We were fortunate enough about 10 years ago to be able to find a lot up on the hill. And we're like, okay, how are we going to make this work? So we built our house so that we could rent it out if we decided to. Rent it out a couple times a year at most, typically. Pays for my taxes so I can afford to live here. And, none of my neighbors rent. So I'm very conscious about being a good neighbor to them. And I heard a lot of complaints kind of both ways. I just wanted to be a part of something that helps make it work for everyone. I am concerned about the schools and losing people that live here. My kids had a great experience and I want other people to experience it. So just here to learn and see what we can do to make everybody happy. Oh, yeah, you take it.
Hi, I'm Sean Steele. Been in the area for five to 7 years. My businesses, I've been in municipalities for 35 to 40 years, so I've had to deal with almost every positive and negative that has ever come across the city council board. But I also make a living here in town. I have retail stores, I have tourist attractions, I have short-term rentals. So when I first heard about this, I thought to myself, we have 100 days to make a living in Saugatuck, Douglas, Saugatuck Township, no matter what occupation you have. So really, was the impact of short-term rentals 365 days or is it 100 days? So I started digging into it to try to see the pluses and minuses of it all. And I guess the reality is my belief as a business owner is no matter what community you're in, whether you're traveling or whether you have a business in it, you have to treat it as if it's your own. You want to be able to go back and visit it again. You want to be able to tell your friends that you had the great experience. And I think Saugatuck area, Douglas area in general has that. And rather than making it such a negative side about how we dislike tourism for whatever reason, really affects me hard. So I try to keep an open mind and think about what is being said to me and how to react to that. So I'll probably say a few things that people don't like. I'll probably bring up another side of a way of looking at something. Already I've heard lots of different opinions of why someone wanted to be on this board. And I can honestly say this isn't my most favorite thing to do, to sit on a board on a Thursday night at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but I do feel it is an economic impact for our community, short-term rentals. Tourism is a huge economic impact for our community. And I think it's important. And I remember when we were voted the top #1 city to visit. And when I see what some cities get the top side now across the US, I wonder, what did we do? What happened? Because what was it last year? Cleveland, Ohio or something was the #1 visited city. Kind of bizarre to me, but I've been there and I don't know, I think Saugatuck's a lot cooler, but so, you know, I just think it's important and I think, you know, a lot of it touches how I make a living. But I also believe that every time I've been into a community, I've listened to everybody. I've tried to make sure I understood that this is their community as well. And if anyone wants to hear stories, I can tell you stories, but good and bad. So that's where I am today.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lauren Stanton. I'm on Saugatuck City Council, so I'm the council representative to the task force. I'm a business owner in town. I own Retro Boat Rentals, the Old Boathouse Bar, and now the Red Dock Bar. So tourism is my business. I also have kids in the school district, one that just graduated and one that's a sophomore at Saugatuck High School. I've lived in this area for about 20 years. I lived in Douglas before I bought the house on Lake Street. And when I bought the house, we had 5 kids living at home. So we needed all the extra bedrooms that we could possibly have at the time. But there was a time when the kids went to college and we decided to rent out our house. And that money that we earned from renting out our house helped us start our business. It was a tool in our financial toolbox and lucky to have it. And I know a lot of people in town understand that. It's a tool in your financial toolbox and we're lucky to have it and happy to be in a tourist town where we do have it, where it's an option for us. But our neighborhoods mean something to me too. So I understand the complaints, you know, that I hear about and they happen to me. For good or for bad, I've learned that I just have a fan app on my phone and I just turn it up and I'm okay with the parties that are happening behind my house. But that being said, I am an open-minded person. I've seen all sides of this issue, and I'm looking forward to coming up with some policies that will work for everybody in our town.
Great. Jamie and Ryan, just introduce yourselves.
All right, well, thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, task force members. Happy to kick this off. As staff, we're not on your actual committee, but it's a good opportunity for us to be able to help support this kind of work. I've said this to maybe a number of you during your interviews, and I've said this to others, but I'm just very impressed with how engaged this community is, how many people are willing to step up and volunteer, the skill set and knowledge and ability that the various community members have. So kudos to you for stepping up and being willing to volunteer so much of your time on such an important issue. I think it's really impressive. As far as what I like about Saugatuck, I love anything on or by the water. So I love taking walks, during my lunch and going along the water. But, I love the aesthetics and character of Saugatuck. And the thing I always try to, that keeps me grounded is the mural on the side of Baldy's there that says smile, you're in Saugatuck. I think that says it all for me. So thank you.
Kyle, you want to introduce yourself and your colleagues from McKenna?
Sure. My name is Kyle Mucha. I am with McKenna. We have been obviously blessed to be a partner with Saugatuck during this process here. I am based out of our Kalamazoo office area. I will honestly say this is the first time I've been to Saugatuck, but even walking here from the parking space to City Hall, I just was like, I need to spend more time. I just was like looking every left, right, everywhere, all the businesses, seeing people downtown. So it gave me good confidence for your task force as well. So I am one of 4 members from our team working with you and probably will be your point of contact as well. Chris Corey, who is also on Zoom, who couldn't attend in person recently, soccer injury, wasn't it, Chris? That you
Yes,
decided?
I recently had ACL surgery. I'm not cleared to drive yet. So I'm here with you guys virtually. And Kyle, I'll let you finish, then I'll take my turn.
Sure. So Chris is and I'll introduce him a little bit too. One of our West Michigan managers, also a senior principal planner with our firm, and has worked with other communities across the state on short-term rentals as well. So working with city staff, we feel confident we can at least assist and partner with the task force and the city as well. I do want to underline to the task force and those in attendance and on Zoom that this is a partnership. We view it as. This is not in any means a way for us to say this is right, this is wrong. We are here to listen and to work and engage with you. That is honestly how we will treat this as well. And then we'll take any feedbacks from city staff and work with them further on. But I do want to at least let you know how we stand and how we view this as a partnership, and it's not a client community relationship. So like I said, Chris is one of the other 4 members of our team. I know the other 2 weren't able to attend, but Chris, if you want to stop
Sure.
me babbling.
Thanks, Kyle. My name is Chris Corey. I'm the West Michigan manager for McKenna. I work out of our Grand Rapids office. As Kyle said, our role is to provide you with information, to analyze data, to help you turn policy into ordinance language, that kind of thing. We're here to answer your questions. We're here to tell you what other communities have done. Obviously, we're not here to make the decisions. That's for the residents, the task force, and the planning commission, the city council, right? But we're excited about this challenge and this opportunity. It is a topic we've addressed in a number of other communities. You guys are not alone. The issues that you guys have, the polarization that comes with them, is very common. You see it up and down the lakeshore and even in inland communities as well. There are a number of different policy topics. You heard a couple of them come out from the public already today that could be discussed. Some of them you have already in place. And we'll just be talking about what are our best practices and what's best for Saugatuck as we try to solve this difficult community issue. Looking forward to working with you guys.
And Madam Chair, if I could too, I just want to note too that one of your city attorneys, Jacob Whitty, is also on Zoom. I don't know if he wants to introduce himself.
That'd be great.
Hi there, Jacob Whitty. I'm an attorney with Fahey Schultz, Brizick Rhodes. My firm has worked with short-term rentals in other jurisdictions. We've seen a variety of approaches. My firm's involvement in this instance is probably going to be a lot more on the back end when it comes to the planning commission and council exploring what changes, if any, need to be done to the city's regulations. But in any event, I'm happy to be here and be involved.
Great, thanks. Okay, thanks, everybody. Now we are ready to move on to 5B, which is the purpose of the short-term rental task force, and Ryan is going to walk us through that.
All right. Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And I think all of you have a good sense, but I want to make sure, we just want to make sure everybody's kind of starting out with the same base as far as, where we're starting from and then kind of next steps and where we're going. And so for everybody's sake, just kind of wanted to touch on how the, it's going to be the second slide, Jamie, how the short-term rental task force was created. And so as Chairman Manns kind of alluded to during his comments, the Planning Commission had kind of set for 2023 some priorities to look at short-term rental regulations. And then the City Council ultimately did the same during a recent strategic planning session back in December. The Planning Commission met in January and actually made a formal recommendation to the City Council to actually establish a short-term rental task force. You're here. The City Council took that up and via resolution established the task force as an advisory committee under the city charter. So what that essentially means is that the task force doesn't have the ability to make a law or create a law or decide ultimately what happens, but certainly you're here to gather facts, gather information, discuss it, and then ultimately make some recommendations to the Planning Commission and City Council. So an important piece for you to realize that it's more of an advisory basis. That's your function, but still very important work nonetheless. So the resolution that the City Council passed kind of had a lot of priorities that were set out on it and kind of laid out really what the purpose of the task force is. And the good thing is you have a lot of work ahead of you, but the City Council was really on top of things and said, look, we want to make sure that the task force has the assistance and facilitation by a professional planning consultant. And so that's why Kyle and his team are here to kind of really help facilitate your conversations and assist you with your work as you meet over the next several months. So the resolution and the task force language essentially stated that the task force is really here to engage residents, property and business owners of the city, the schools, public safety, other community stakeholders. There's a very long list, right? And really kind of prioritize what are the actual issues? What are the concerns? What are the opportunities that the city has? And then what are the ultimate objectives that the city is looking to accomplish with having short-term rentals in the community? Another priority that was set out for the task force was to really do some robust data gathering and gathering insights. And so that will be from internal city sources, but also a lot of third-party data is available to you. There's some costs to some of those things, and we'll have to kind of talk about some of that as we go along and weigh out really what data we need and then what the cost is and work with City Council on approvals for funding for those items. Certainly, we want to look at historical data and look at trends and kind of see where we're at and where we're at now. And then look at, how many registered properties, where are we at currently, where are they located, what are the occupancy levels? The task force is supposed to look at complaints and any past enforcement action. And then part of that engagement is really conducting forums and surveys to really kind of get a sense and feel of where the stakeholders are at and what they're thinking. So from there, if there's any changes that the task force is thinking about, the resolution that the council passed indicated that the task force should review and discuss policies of similar resort communities that have made similar changes. So kind of gathering what others have done. So that way you can kind of make an informed decision, look at best practices, but also consider the policies and ordinances and practices of your neighboring municipalities. So Saugatuck Township, Douglas, and then ultimately looking at, what does the community's master plan say? And at the end of all of this, it's kind of putting all those pieces together, and the way that it was worded in the resolution was providing a balanced executive summary to the Planning Commission and City Council by September 21st. And that's ultimately your charge. And so that tying everything together in that report will involve, what quantitative and qualitative data that you've gathered during this process, providing some better definition of the concerns and issues. What are your actual recommendations to the Planning Commission and City Council? And then if there are changes that you're recommending, what are the goals and objectives of those changes? And then how do we actually measure those goals and objectives? That's ultimately where you'll end up in the end. So any questions on, that's kind of you all had the resolution in your packet to read over. I'm sure you're quite familiar with it, but just kind of wanted to touch on that as a summary.
Questions?
No? All right.
Great.
I know you guys want to get to the meat of it and talk with Kyle about the process. So, all right. So some other kind of housekeeping pieces. This is kind of your first meeting. Some of you have served on boards and commissions in the past, and others may not have, and that's okay. So, you're kind of being gathered together as we're calling you as a public body. And public bodies in Michigan are subject to the Michigan Open Meetings Act. So there's certain requirements that you as a task force have to meet legally to stay compliant and on the up and up. Essentially, they're kind of sunshine laws that basically, while you have this seat at the table, everybody else has an opportunity to kind of see your work. It's out in the open. There's no backroom dealing and things like that. All the discussions and deliberations should be occurring here in this room. So we want to make sure that all of your meetings are open to the public. We want to make sure that all of your meetings have an opportunity for the public to comment and provide you with feedback and participate in the process. All of your meetings are required to have actual notice of when the meeting is going to occur and the location. And then your great city clerk is here and she's going to take your meeting minutes for you. So there's a record. And then we're going above and beyond here in the city of Saugatuck. All of your meeting packets are being posted on the city website. Everything is being sent out in an email news blast to those that have signed up. All of these meeting packets will remain available on the website throughout this process. And then the meeting video of today, we allow folks to participate via Zoom. This is being recorded. All of your meetings are being recorded. Anybody can go back and watch at any time. So just to, let's make sure everybody's aware, there are penalties for violating the Open Meetings Act. Certainly the city could be subject to lawsuits. Certainly certain decisions could be overturned by the courts. And then if you intentionally violate the Open Meetings Act, there's actually some personal, civil, or criminal liabilities that you could face. So basically, discuss everything here. Don't discuss it outside of an open meeting. If there's a quorum of you, that'll avoid the issues. We want to avoid, unintentional chance meetings. There may be, it's a small town, right? So there's going to be times when some of you may end up at the same place. And that's essentially what the Attorney General said, is that that's going to happen. That's okay. But when you end up at the same place, don't discuss the business that is to occur here. So don't be, deliberating about short-term rentals and groups and quorums and those sorts of things in those types of settings. This kind of stick to if you're going to a restaurant or an event and you all happen to be there, that's great. Say hi to each other. Just keep the business of short-term rentals here in this room. Another thing to be aware of is we don't want to get into any round robin deliberations where maybe smaller groups of you are meeting and then another smaller group meets, and then essentially you're kind of deciding things outside of an open meeting. We want to avoid those. And we also want to avoid all of you emailing as a group back and forth because that wouldn't be in an open setting. Not everybody's able to see those emails while they're occurring. And so that would be an Open Meetings Act issue. So just want to make sure that if I send you something in an email or consultants or, well, really that's going to be me communicating with you, but I may send something from them that you not reply all to. If you have a concern or question, that's totally okay. You can reach out to me, reach out to the chair. But we just want to avoid any reply all situations where we're discussing things and others can see maybe what your thoughts and questions or opinions are outside of these meetings. So in short, we want to make sure we're providing notice, keeping everything open to the public, allowing for public comment. We're going to keep those meeting minutes and then only discuss short-term rental business here in this room since you're serving on the task force. Any questions on the Open Meetings Act? Like I said, kind of housekeeping, but all right. Another thing along those lines is going to be the Freedom of Information Act, because you're serving in this capacity as a public body. We could receive requests, Freedom of Information Act requests related to your work. So somebody could, submit a request to the city to say, I want a copy of any emails staff have sent to the short-term rental task force. Or they could say, hey, I want to see if any of these short-term rental task force members have been emailing each other about this business. So we just want to be very careful though, again, keep everything here. Realizing that the business that you're conducting and the records are subject to review, and that includes emails and texts and those sorts of things. So, and essentially the goal is transparency, right? Again, it's a sunshine law, and really the Freedom of Information Act is a pro-disclosure statute. So, if anybody at some point approaches you and says, hey, I want a copy of this or a copy of that, send them to the city clerk. She's our FOIA coordinator. They don't have to use the words FOIA. If somebody says, I want a copy of something, that can be considered a request for records. So if somebody needs something, please send them to staff. We'll be more than happy to provide them with what we need to provide them with related to your work. And the other piece of that is if you do get a request like that, there's timeliness issues that we have to follow. So it's even more important that we get it to the clerk. So that way we're getting back to them timely. So real quick, but that's all I have, Madam Chair.
Great. Any questions for Ryan on any of that? Okay. That takes us to 5D, which is to go through the phases, tasks, and deliverables. And Kyle is going to walk us through their proposal that we will be following.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. For those following along, it starts on page 28 of your packets. I believe Jamie will pull it up here too as well. We've been working with city staff and the chair to kind of help outline the scope of analysis. And Chris too, please jump in anytime here as well, if you have questions or comments. So phase one for us is going to be a comparison analysis and assessment of that. And what we mean by that for members of the audience as well is information gathering. So we'll look at local level data. We'll work with the city to gather enforcement data, rental registrations that's already out there, other concerns, policy documents, that nature. As well, we'll gather information from regional comparisons, meaning potentially Douglas. We'll look at Holland as well for maybe short-term rentals, maybe South Haven. We're still kind of teasing that out, but it would be other, like Chris mentioned, lakefront communities, and then possibly inland one as well. And then kind of do a synopsis of what those findings are. We'll also obviously have task force meetings, which I am very excited about, especially for how lovely your city is too. So I will keep dropping that. I know you guys live here, you may not see it as much, but for me, I do enjoy that. So that's kind of task one. And that's a lot of this items that we will handle kind of more administratively and on the back end. And then probably at least once a month, if not more, depending on our meeting schedule, we'll kind of provide an overview of what we've been finding so far, just to keep the task force aware and abreast as well. And because we have a shorter deadline with some kind of recommendation or a finalization by September, we understand too that we really have three solid months to kind of go through this process as well. So there'll potentially be a lot of information coming to you that will be background info that we'll ask you to review and then bring up and discuss as well. So that takes care of phase one. Chris, anything you want to add on phase one?
No, Kyle, I think you got it.
All right.
We'll answer any questions if there are any.
Feel free to jump
Yeah.
in if you have a question about any task.
Lauren.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I just, you were talking about comparing Douglas and the township. I know they're looking at what we're doing. So you might want to go outside of Saugatuck Township and Douglas.
For sure.
Howland is one, South Haven, and might even have to trickle down to New Buffalo and some of the other communities, just because Douglas and the township have not done a lot as far as any kind of, huge policy changes. So just keep that in mind, what our neighboring communities are doing.
Sure. No, thank you, Lauren.
Yes.
We also, when we mentioned the immediate communities, like Ryan said earlier too, we want to see what kind of impact that may have. So will those be driving factors to Saugatuck? If they prohibit them, does that then make it Saugatuck more of an attraction for short-term rentals? If they have less strict regulations, will that help maybe ease some of the burden or pain that residents are feeling on that? So that's what we mean by local as well. Like we mentioned, Holland we'll probably look at as well, potentially South Haven, maybe some other on the east side of the state. We haven't finalized a number yet with city staff on how many to look at, but probably initially we're hoping for 5-6 comparisons just to give a good sample of that as well.
Good, thanks for clarifying.
Anything else? Great.
Phase two, public participation and community outreach. This will also be critical for us as well. We want to do community engagement. We want to receive input back from the residents and from stakeholders in the community. There is additional, I believe, scopes further along in the packet that we'll want to eventually bring up and discuss with the task force of what they may feel is appropriate for types of public engagement. We've done postcards in the past. We've done online surveys. Really, we've found ever since the pandemic started and people are home, it's survey fatigue. You know, you're so tired of seeing them, and every email you get, just here's a survey, take a survey, take a survey. So we're tired. We get tired of that too. What we find to be more beneficial is public engagement, where you're meeting with residents and constituents and your stakeholders. We have a term we like as well. It's kind of called the kitchen table. We'll print up a big 3 foot by 3 foot map of the community, and it kind of lets residents and stakeholders naturally gravitate to that table, and then dialogue with staff on how, what concerns they see, what are good areas. Because as members of the community, where the hill is. I have no idea. I came down a hill. Yes, I know that. And I'd be terrified in the winter on that thing being icy coming down that thing. I think it's Old Allegan. But yeah, so anyway, I'd be, so that's where residents can come in and point out what their concerns are as well. And it helps us engage and get more of a feel for what they're perceiving to be concerns or even positives are as well. So that's something we'll want to work with the task force on, determining what type of public engagement they're seeking and recommending, and then eventually to city council. And I know there's further documents in the packet on public engagement. I'm happy to go, Holly, further on that, or just keep walking down.
Yeah, I think we can, because I know we'll focus on this later, but this will be a really important part of what this task force does. And I know at the last planning commission meeting, we talked at some length about ensuring we reach out to people in all of the different ways they like to be reached out to. So some traditional survey will be important, but making sure we get to people digitally as well as, other ways to engage in person. So I think all of us can start thinking about that and how we can efficiently but creatively really tap into different stakeholder groups so that we really do capture the voice of all of the people in our community and all of the interests. And I think, to all of the question, what we talked about as we were introducing ourselves, I think that's how we ensure we're being fair and really do come up with recommendations that represent the community.
And then we get into task 3, which will be our recommendations. And that'll be kind of our synopsis of our findings from the public outreach, the findings from the regional, local comparisons as well, some analysis of best practices that we're seeing even nationally, what the drive is on that, and then make those recommendations to the task force of what are more of our key findings of what we have, and then work with the task force on crafting those recommendations to the planning commission and then ultimately to city council. We also believe in kind of graphically rich designs as well. I know some people like to read technical data. I don't as much. My eyes start to hurt. I like to see the pretty pictures, and I'll just be blunt with you. It's helpful. It's visually exactly like Jamie's pulling up there. It's something like that's going to be more eye attractive. So we want to make sure we have a nice balance between not only the data recommendations, but also make it visually appealing so that it's easy to understand at a glance as well. So that's kind of where our team on the back end will also help facilitate this. So that's for policies and zoning recommendations as well. And then our ongoing meetings, we'll work with obviously the task force, planning commission, and then council on that. So.
Great. Any questions for Kyle on any of the phases?
So when you go back to council or planning commission, is that part of the open act? Like you don't have a meeting with us and then have a different meeting with council? It's all going to funnel through the task force, right? And then before it goes to council or planning commission, it's by the task force recommendation.
Yes.
Those will all be open meetings as well. So.
Yep. So in our mind and charm, what would happen is as we get to the stage to present to planning commission, we'll give a synopsis of, hey, over the past 6 weeks, 8 weeks, the task force has met. Here have been the key findings that we will share with the planning commission. This is what the task force is recommending or advising the planning commission to look into further. Do you agree? Yes or no? And then just keep working it through that. All of any kind of recommendations will be based on our analysis and our dialogue with you. So, thank you.
And one thing we talked about early on with in the planning commission is if there's, you know, differences in points in the point of view of this group, to be sure that anything we present to planning or city council reflects that, so that we really do want to present a balanced recommendations and background. So I think that will be important.
Now, what Jamie has pulled up there, and I know Chris loves it, especially with sticky notes. We print up boards as well, and Ryan already alluded to it a little bit in his presentation as well. But we like to know what the key findings are. You know, what are the positive aspects of maybe a short-term rental? What are maybe less positive, such as noise? And we design a board like that up there, and then ask residents to help give their ideas, and then we'll collect all that. And so you'll see some of our boards may have 50, 100 sticky notes, and then others mainly have 5 or 10, which then helps us kind of narrow down what the concerns are. So we, as we go through public engagement, don't craft it in the sense of, all right, how do we shut down short-term rentals? So we want to craft it as, what are your concerns that we need to be aware of and need to help address so that you feel confident in the direction this is going as well. So that's what we try to preface during our public engagement periods as well. It is not a, we know all and it'll be all. It is, we want to hear from the residents and stakeholders to help drive this factor. We're just here to help facilitate that. So. Yes, sir.
So on that board there, you have hiking, biking trails. Is that a display of something above and beyond a short-term rental task force? Or do you ask questions of like that as well as?
Chris, you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's just an example of the type of engagement activity we do. This one, I think, was more for a citywide plan. Right. So yeah, for in this case, in the case of this, we'd be looking more at we either have these, as Kyle said, broken down by sort of category of concern, or maybe we'll break them down geographically or something like that. Either way, it's the point is to get people talking, and we like this picture because there's just so many sticky notes on there, which indicates a robust conversation among the public.
So does that board then get created through the task force thought process, or is that what you're going to do and present to the task force?
Yeah, we'll in preparation for the community engagement meetings, we're gonna we'll run the activities and questions that we plan to ask by the task force for your feedback and revision before we go into production on them and have them ready to go.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Actually, just kind of going back to, you were talking about like comparing with the water. I think that we're somewhat unique to other waterfront communities in the fact that we don't have any manufacturing and or industry type. So is there a strategy or kind of anything in place to, being compared to Holland or South Haven, where they have an abundance or very robust manufacturing communities, kind of, I don't know if that's a whole balance in that aspect. So I don't know if there's other communities that I can't think of off the top of my head are strictly tourism per se.
Sure. Sorry, did I interrupt my colleague there? Actually, we have a couple of examples off the top of my head. You guys do have some similarities, places like South Haven and Holland, because you're more dense, walkable, small towns. But there are also more rural places that don't have that manufacturing base that are very residentially focused. One that just went through a robust process, just like you guys are doing on short-term rentals, is Park Township. On the northwestern side of Lake Macatawa. That's a suburban rural community where short-term rentals are coming into neighborhoods, right? Where there's very little, as you say, manufacturing or that kind of thing. These were very, very quiet neighborhoods, and they now have a number of short-term rentals in them. And so that is definitely a direct comparison that we can make because of that similarity. Also further south, we've gone through a robust process with Chickaming Township, which is between St. Joseph and New Buffalo. And that is a largely rural community, and again, with very little in terms of manufacturing base, frankly, very little commercial activity at all, except around a couple of highway exits. And they went through the same issue. So nowhere is exactly comparable, right? You guys wouldn't be so popular for short-term rentals if there was another Saugatuck somewhere else, right? But we can find things that are comparable to you in all sorts of different ways.
Steve.
As we're discussing this, the kind of comparables, if anyone was listening to some of the planning commission as well as council meetings earlier this year, I think everyone who's representing the planning council, and hopefully everybody here is on the task force, understands all they're trying to do is give us information of what other cities have done, how they approached it. We're approaching it differently. Having this task force created really was designed to be able to say, we're listening to Saugatuck. Whatever the solution that we want to recommend, I would recommend to everybody here on the task force, is that we want to listen to it. We want to create what's right for Saugatuck. We're not trying to look at another city and say, well, this is what they did, and this is, so we should do the same thing. And so hopefully everyone who's on the task force is comfortable with that, and everyone who's out in the audience and who is listening to it kind of understands the reason this process is being held is so that we do it for Saugatuck and we look at what's best for our community and then the surrounding community and what effect it would have on that. I think that is an important, concept. But yeah, there's nothing being said that we're going to look at it and say, oh, we like what this city did. Let's duplicate it.
Right.
Because our city is unique. We have similarities, but it is definitely unique. And the more that we as task force members or anybody who's listening in the audience can continue to try to communicate that out, that it is Saugatuck focused. We want the transparency, that there's no agenda, with this task force or with where we're going with it.
Yeah, and to that end, just underscoring that the people who are on the task force do represent really important, experiences and stakeholders. And so, learning from people who have grown short-term rental businesses in Saugatuck and have decades of experience will be incredibly valuable, as well as, people who have rented, bought a house, rented it out to, get some income. So all of those, we want to hear from the task force as well as we get into, more into the deliberation so that we hear your voice, and then who else, do we need to listen to and talk to, and so that again is how we'll be sure we represent and understand the differences.
Madam Chair, if I may also expand too, just as a process, Sean, I think you asked about it. Any recommendations, I want to go back to this just so it's clear for the task force, it's clear for members of the audience as well. Any recommendations or any kind of key findings we present to you are not going to be adopted that next day. They still have an entire process to go through. They have to be vetted by you guys as a task force, get your recommendation support. They would then be forwarded on to the planning commission where they'd have public comment as well. And then potentially even to city council. So there's a multi-step process to get anything adopted on that. So I wanted to preface that now as well as we look at this, that just because we might present findings or potential language down the road for consideration, that does not mean the next day it will be in effect. I think a lot of us know that, but I do want to preface that for members of the audience as well as we move through this process. As Ryan mentioned, this is just an advisory committee, and that still it takes further processes through planning commission and city council. So I just wanted to preface that as well. So.
Anything else? Okay. Next on the agenda is scheduling our next meeting. We're aiming to meet on the 2nd and 4th Thursdays of each month between 3 and 5. Is it, or the first, it's the 1st and 3rd. Yeah, that's an important correction. 1st and 3rd. The third Thursday, there's a conflict. The zoning board of appeals is having training that's going to be happening at this time. So we need to reschedule. We need to figure out what to do about our next meeting. And I think, Ryan, you want to?
Yeah, sure, Madam Chair. And apologies, the zoning board of appeals training was scheduled quite a while ago before the task force was really formed and we knew which date. So I apologize that already your second meeting, you're looking at a potential change. But after that, we have them blocked out 1st and 3rd Thursdays from 3 to 5 p.m. We're going to keep with that schedule. If we are running into situations where the task force is like, we don't need to meet every 2 weeks, but we can go a month, we can certainly look at that. That's within your purview if you feel like you don't want to have a meeting. But we do have a tight timeline here too. And I think, our planners are going to really want your feedback on a regular basis to meet those deadlines. So options, as far as your next meeting, we discussed with the chair. I didn't know if there would be interest from members. The problem is we have a planning commission meeting that same evening, so we can't go later that day. We didn't know if the task force maybe thought it would be wise to maybe meet a little earlier that day or look at another day that week. With what the preference of the group is. So wide open discussion. We're open. So.
Brian and Madam Chair, will we have enough information from McKenna by the third week to justify the meeting? Or would it be better to have a full month for them to get all the data together so that we come together on June 1st? That we actually have things to look at and be able to discuss?
We are amenable to either way. We understand this is a priority. It's a exciting topic for the city as well. If you wish to not have the second meeting in May, that yes, does give us more time to collect and analyze data. However, we do want to keep this moving forward as well. So it is obviously, we serve at your pleasure kind of deal. If we're looking at that, there are other items we can potentially look at, not only, comparisons, enforcement, but more of a key findings and more of a, what do we want to see out of this? What are the task force concerns moving forward? We've already alluded to some of that. So that'll help us build up 2 areas of concerns to review. But ultimately, Chris, you have any other comments on that one?
Sorry, it took me a minute to unmute. No, I'd reiterate what Kyle said. I think if we if we do a full month, there's probably more we can have ready for you, just realistically, but we can have information ready for a robust discussion in 2 weeks, if that's what you guys want to do.
So just people looking at their calendars, is it possible? I mean, maybe just a show of hands, if 1 to 3 on 2 weeks from now isn't even an option for folks.
What's the date?
May
18th. Yep, May 18th.
So if yes, raise your hand if that would work. And raise of hands on whether you want to meet again in 2 weeks and sort of keep the momentum going, or whether you'd rather wait a month, knowing we would have more to review then. So those thinking sooner or 2 weeks? Month? Okay, I think 2 weeks looks like the consensus is there.
Okay.
And I'm assuming I didn't violate any meeting protocol by doing raise of hands. Thank you.
Everybody could see what the
Yeah.
consensus.
Okay, so we'll plan on our next meeting from 1 to 3 on Thursday, May 18th here.
Madam Chair, if you will indulge me here, I guess we'd like to, as we talked about the tasks already, if there are other tasks, as we continue to collect and analyze data with the city staff, if there's any ideas from the task force that they would like us to review between now and then, that would also be helpful. Because you're right, some of this may take us a month to do, but we still want to make sure we're hitting your goals. So if there are items you would like us to address between now and then, that would be helpful too as direction.
So I think it might be helpful for us to get a sense when you present us with comparable data, what will that include? Like percentage of short-term rentals in that community, sort of how they govern it, or I'm just trying to it might be helpful for us to get a sense of what we can expect.
Chris, anything you want to add to that?
Sure. I think there's a number of different categories of things we talk about because, and frankly, the policies the different communities have put in place and this issue are wildly different. But they're all interesting to look at and compare to how you think they might work in Saugatuck, right? So we'd have, first thing would be, are they allowed? And if they're, I don't know if there's any communities that outright ban them, and that might be its own issue. So let's get past that for a second. But under what circumstances are they allowed? Zoning districts, are there limits, are there separation distances, that kind of thing. So we'd have that as a category. We'd have a category of any sort of building requirements in terms of bedrooms, in terms of people per bedroom. Then we'd have anything on more of the code enforcement, public safety side. For instance, things were brought up earlier, parking issues or residents, code of conduct, renters code of conduct. We have one community that requires, someone who can be at the property within 15 minutes, 24 hours a day on call and keeps things of that nature. So we'd have that as a column. And there might be a couple other sort of categories of thing that we come up with that we walk through with you guys, and then we'll take it one category at a time, and you can see the spectrum of what other communities are doing within that category.
And if I could, I'm sorry.
Just a quick question. I mean, if we made this meeting for next week, can we get
2 weeks.
2 weeks, we'll get an expectation of what the task force is going to get from you in that 2 weeks, so that we don't have to guess and come up with all these ideas and send it to you if you're already planning on presenting it.
Sure.
And then at that meeting, can you give us our expectations for the following meeting? Because I think that would just help guide with what's going to happen on the next phases, instead of us thinking about it, sending all this stuff back and forth.
I think, go ahead, Chris.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'll, defer to Kyle as our project manager on this, on the specific workflow. Like I said, with the 2 week window versus the 4 week window, since we're in the 2 week window, is probably going to be we're not going to get as much stuff to you probably. And then that would be done on the next 2 weeks. So yeah, I think as a workflow request, we're absolutely amenable to that. That makes sense. Here, this is what we're doing this meeting. This is what we're doing next meeting. So be prepared. We can absolutely do that.
Have something.
Yeah, I think, since we have a 2 week turnaround and maybe we're still gathering a lot of information, I think one thing that might be beneficial for the task force and community members is certainly we want to gather what others are doing. I think the task force needs to have a good understanding of where we're currently at with our regulations.
Yes.
What is a short-term rental?
Yep.
How is it defined? Where are they allowed at? How many do we have? We have some of that initial data. I think it would be good just to get us a baseline, that we have local agent requirements within 45 miles, just so everybody has a baseline of here's where we're at. And then we can kind of, that seems like a good 2 week topic.
Yeah, I can sort of present Saugatuck like we'll be presenting the other communities, and maybe a little bit more in depth for us. I think that's a great idea, Ryan. And Lauren, it looked like you had a question or comment.
Just in your data, Chris, if one of the things that I would love to see comparables are fees. The fees that are there for, our license establishments, but also if there's any kind of taxes that are placed on, like a user tax, something like a hotel tax type of thing. If there are other communities doing that, that's just a couple of things that I would like to see comparables on.
Great. And I think too, we can view this as iterative. So, we'll get presumably great data in 2 weeks, but as we think of things, we might want to go back to those communities with other, with questions about like, how do they handle enforcement? Is that, and all of that. So, but yeah, I think the more robust we can get, knowing that it's not our only opportunity. Steve?
One, I would just suggest that we consider as a group, the next meeting, Ryan already kind of touched upon, because I wrote it down earlier. I do think that we went through the open meetings in that, but we need to start off with showing everybody what is our current ordinance. I mean, I've read them, city council room. I don't know how many people in the room or even on the task force has taken time to read through the ordinance, the way it currently stands, and where short-term rentals are allowed, where they're not allowed, what are our fees, what's our process. All that I think would be very important to make that the kickoff for like the next meeting. In your packet on page 37, if you people didn't have a chance, was a diagram that kind of shows all the existing short-term rentals. I would ask each task force member to kind of review this, walk around your community. I've done it for just like our neighborhood that Holly and I were talking about. It shows 2 licenses. I know of 4 homes there that are short-term rentals. So I've highlighted that for myself. If everybody else in this room could kind of do that. So we kind of, because that's one of the questions that's come up. I know in some of the research we were doing, even before we formed the task force, was trying to get an idea of we had some third parties that kind of told us a number that they believe, number of homes that are actually renting, and we compare that to the number of licenses. That's going to be something we're going to want to take a look at, because one of the numbers was like 387 and we have 242 licenses. Are we really that far off? I don't think so. But those are the kind of things we need to get our hands around. So if everybody, I know I'm going to do it, but I would suggest everybody else can do it, kind of take a look at that map. See if there's things that you can at least point out to where we would know, is it reliable, or are we missing data? And then I was planning on coming into the next meeting with just kind of suggest, because we're going to get data, but what about if each of us talk to our neighbors and some of the people in our community, and we all come back with 4 or 5 of what you're hearing are the top issues. And maybe we can take a sheet from the whiteboard up here and we'll just write it down what the task force is bringing in. What are the issues that you're hearing? What are the positives of short-term rental? What are the opportunities with short-term rental? By the time we probably get to the third person, we'll probably be duplicating a lot of that. But I think that'd be kind of an interesting thing to bring for McKenna as we're starting to look at some of the other communities. And we'll see if they're telling us, hey, this is what other communities listed as issues. We might be like, oh, look, ours are exactly the same. And then you can kind of start to see, where your similarities are. That's just my suggestions as a member here for the next meeting.
Joe?
Yeah, actually, I think those are great suggestions. Both of them. One, I was going to ask a question because I had the same observation when I went through the map, right? So this doesn't add up, right? Is that off current data or?
Those are the current licenses. Those are the currently registered short-term rentals, but we found some, we have some of the same questions. Even something as high level as the US Census identifies you guys with over 400 housing units that are not continuously occupied. So they're either short-term rentals or second homes or something like that. So there's like, that's like 4 different numbers that have been thrown out in the last 5 minutes by reasonably reliable sources. That's what we got to get a handle on,
Okay. And then I think to your second point, well, I mean, we've all heard a lot of positives and negatives, right? And so to the degree we can get down and start deliberating and getting those on the table, it's not only going to help us understand what we're hearing, at least from the sphere of influence we have within the community, but it's also going to help shape, I would think, the questions that we're going to ask the community if we are going to reach out, and whether it's in the form of a survey or whatever it is you guys come up with. It's important that we start, getting a feel for what those issues are and how to pose the questions, right, to try and get under the covers of what those issues may be or benefits, right? So.
Madam Chair, if I could expand on that too. And Sean, I know this kind of goes back to your point about a task list as well and a objection, but Joe, thank you as well. That will help Chris and our team on that to make sure that we're addressing your concerns as we look into cross comparisons. And then also to help us determine too what the next steps are as we move through the process. I mean, if we're getting into it, we're 3-4 weeks in and we're still scratching surfaces of the various data. Task Force has come up with really robust questions they want us to look into. That'll help us kind of project out over the summer too of what we need to look into. So Sean, I'm all for a structured thing like that too. We just want to make sure that not only do we have our task list for you, but we're addressing the concerns you guys have as well. So that's what I'm looking for. So otherwise, we're happy to continue running through this and plowing through, but we feel like that might not be as hitting the concerns that you guys as a task force have in the community. Because we're not, I'd love to be a member, but like we're not members of your community, so you know the concerns, the positivity. So we want to make sure we're addressing those as well as continuing to move through. So
Maybe what you can do to help us with that is sort of help us think through the categories of sort of feedback to provide and being mindful of concerns and opportunities so that we're, showing a commitment to looking at, both the positives of short-term rentals and what they bring to our community, as well as concerns that people have. But like, for example, an easy one would be, enforcement or governance. And so what are some of the sort of the buckets or categories we can use might make then that sort of exercise more efficient. And we could even maybe have that in the agenda or in the meeting packet so people can they can organize the feedback they've gotten before we get here.
Yeah, I think just breaking it down on a whiteboard, right? I mean, there's economics, occupancy, density. There's probably 4 or 5 key topics that, we all could probably agree to, and then we can, submit feedback on each one of them, break it down. That's going to help them frame out, whatever information or how we're going to pose that out to the community to get additional input and kind of just keep iterate till we get enough granularity that you feel we can make recommendations.
And then Joe, on that too, working with city staff, that would be helpful to know at your next meeting, kind of what the top 5 or 6 are. So then as we continue on our bi-weekly meetings, we can maybe hit one of those, focus on one of those as part of the discussion, as Chair Holly said. So that'll help us to drive that. So.
And yeah, and frame sort of the research that we do that will maybe be a little bit more comprehensive. Great. Other questions on this? Great. So next meeting, 2 weeks from today, 1 to 3, and then we'll get back to the 3 to 5 slot on the first and third Thursdays. Next topic on the agenda is communications. In the packet was a communication from Ms. Breyer, and she also had a letter in the commercial record this week. So encourage you, and, to everybody on Zoom and in the audience, feel free to email. You can email Jamie as our clerk, or Ryan, or me, I guess. And we'll be sure to get those in the packets, but that's important. And as you're talking to people, remind them that they can come and, participate in these meetings, and also write us so that we have a record of everybody's feedback. So I think that takes us to the final public comment period. We'll start in the room, and this can be on anything short-term rental related. Just come up to the podium and give us your name, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Peter Hansen. I live up on Upper Spear. I lived here since 2007, and retired to this community because we wanted to live in a small town in a neighborhood close to restaurants and the galleries and so forth. When we first moved here, there was one rental on our street, and it's a 2-block street, dead ends either end. We're up to 5 now, and I suspect as houses turn over, we could have more. And so that is, I think we look at the stakeholders here, and people who have businesses or they do vacation rentals, they benefit from the tourists who come to town. And I certainly understand we are a tourist community, but we also have people who live here too. And I'm not sure that we see the full benefit when we have a high density rental unit next door to us, and the people are here for vacation, and they're out at the fire pit, or they're on their screened in porch. And at, 12 and 1 o'clock in the morning, they're having conversations. And when you live up on the hill, you can be pretty close to each other. And those things disturb our enjoyment of the neighborhood. The city itself, its only benefit is that they get about $75 a year from an application for short-term rental, $75. And that certainly is not enough to manage such a huge issue here for the town. And I think that's an easy one to address. That fee has to be increased and increased dramatically. The schools, the more vacation rentals we have, we're going to have fewer kids going to schools. And right now we are running short of kids already for our schools. And if we keep having more and more short-term rentals, we're going to have fewer kids. And yet we have some wonderful schools, wonderful properties, and we're expanding them right now. And then the last thing, I know that people are concerned with their housing values, but I know that I would ask the question, if I were to buy now in Saugatuck, how many of these other houses by the house I'm looking at are vacation rentals? And I think you're going to get people voting with their feet. They're going to sell their house because they don't want to be surrounded by short-term vacation rentals. And I don't think that's what we want for our community, is to be a whole bunch of short-term vacation rentals. So I look forward to hearing from the committee, and I plan to participate. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is, my name is John Porzondek. I live at 790 Lake Street. Lauren is one of my neighbors. We are celebrating 20 years renting our place out. It's a multi-use building there, and the house was converted in 1954 to 2 apartments upstairs, which was once a single-family home. So we started very frugally back then. It was a wreck, it was a tear down. And what we used our rentals for is that we took the money that we made during the year and we just plowed it right back into the home. Took us 18 years to redo that home single-handedly, of course, with Brian. But it was as a business. I mean, it saved us. It saved a home. And the remarks that we get from people coming, you know, these people come from Chicago and some big cities where they live in apartments, and they come back and they live in a home for 3 days, and they enjoy it. They walk downtown, and Saugatuck is really special to them, where they've come back decade after decade. When my parents came back here, my grandparents came back here. So it's almost a historic place for certain individuals and families where they come back and stay not only at our place, but many places throughout the city. When we came in here in 2002, we spoke to a real estate homeowner up on the hill. She said about 20 to 25% of the homes were rentals at the time. I think we're now north of 75%. We live in our little corner of the city, Lake and State. So I really don't know what else is going on other than the wild parties up on the hill. But I think we gave them some notice last year with a couple parties. But you call the police, and then you charge the owner the police fee rather than taxes. Taxes. My taxes went up 2,000 this year. For what? I didn't do anything except get rained on. So, you know, there's other ways to do besides taxes. I think people here are taxed out in Saugatuck. And we support a lot of the businesses, but what are we doing to the homeowners? I know it's all goes to the school. That's okay. But countrywide, we're an aging population. Not having kids. I don't want any kids anymore. I already had mine. But 20 years we've been here, and hopefully we'll be here a few more. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Wendy Ryder, and one of the things that I thought of when you were talking about the cities that you, in townships that you want to maybe compare this city to. I am a second homeowner. Is the couple that you actually mentioned, Town City is not a resort town. Park Township doesn't have a downtown, and neither does Chickamine. And I would hope that maybe you guys would look at maybe other townships or cities that actually have a downtown in them, like all the cities up in Leelanau Peninsula, Harbor Springs, Sutton's Bay, some of the areas like that, I think represent more equal to what Saugatuck is and what you guys are looking at and doing some of those types of things. The other thing is a mention about your schools and how wonderful they are. They are wonderful here. I don't have any children, but I do know that the school system is one of the best school systems. And the reason it's one of the best school systems is because there's so many second homes in this community. Second homes pay 18 mils more than any other homeowner that is a primary home. That all that 18 mils goes 100% to the school systems. Saugatuck School Systems has the most per capita money that is spent per child in any school in the state of Michigan. And so that is something, if you want to be proud of your schools, the second homeowners is making that possible. Thank you.
My name is Michael Economist. I live at 716 Park Street. My home is surrounded by 4 homes, none of which are owner occupied. And that's changed in the last 20 years. or more that we have been here. Other things have changed. I don't know if people are aware of what's happened to our permanent resident population. But in the year 2000 census, we had 1,065 permanent residents. In the 2010 census, we had 925. And in the last census, 865 permanent residents. It's not a healthy thing to have a city where the population is going, the permanent population is going down. We've lost out of 1,065 permanent residents we had in 2000, we've lost 60. That's about 18%. In fact, it's more than 18%, almost 19%. I don't think it's healthy for a community to see its permanent population going down. And I don't think people think about it. My particular problem is of these 4 houses, one of them is a summer residence and the people are there not very often, but they're there. And the other 3 are rented out. We live on small lots, 66 by 66. But we have a space between our houses and the rest of them, and the area is wooded. Now, our experience with the tenants, and most of them, 3 houses are, 2 houses became rental properties in the last 2 years. One has been there for maybe 10 years. Is that the owners are not present. And what happens is we have they don't take care of the yards. Okay, we have woods and leaves. Just this year is the most leaves I've ever seen. But I can't clean my yard unless the others clean their yard, because the leaves just blow back onto my yard again. And I don't like that. I don't, I know it's a resort community, but I'd like to have some sense of a neighborhood. I don't have that. My nearest neighbor lives permanently a block away.
Thank you. Your time's up. Thanks so much. Anyone else? Come up.
Actually, my concern actually relates to all kind of rentals, and it is the impact it is on municipal services. Angela Canals, and I live on the hill. I'm especially concerned about ambulance service. Saugatuck and Douglas do not have an ambulance. They rent out another one. And in the summer, if there are 3 accidents, the 3rd person just has to wait. And so I think we have to think about that too.
Thank you.
Hi, James Sermon. I live at 790 Lake Street. Been a resident since 2002. I'd like to say, as far as a nuisance, to address the nuisance kind of thing, noise and things like that, people would be complaining about. I would suggest that 3 strike and you're out, or 3 calls and you're out, when you get a fine from the police department, and letting them use like a Square app where they can take their credit card and swipe it after 3 calls over a weekend time period or something like that. If they have to go to the same residence more than 3 times, or up to 3 times, and they get swiped, for a nuisance violations, just to keep the noise down.
Thank you.
Hello, is this hot? This mic's pretty hot. Okay, about
foot away from it. I sing, play guitar and, it's not an SM58 where you gotta be right on it. But anyways. I'm Brendan Stark. I own a condo in town and it's a secondary residence, but I do rent it out and I can't afford it unless I rent it out because the taxes are very high here. Beautiful city. I 100% support that though. I mean, I love this city. I live in Grand Rapids. I'm here all the time and I rent it out. So I want to say that I understand the concerns of everybody here and it has to be a balance of people who live here and people who rent out. And I understand that completely, right? However, property here is very expensive. And for me, the only way I can afford it is to rent it out. Like I said, not to be repetitive, right? So I would have never invested in a short-term rental in a beach city that's expensive had I not been able to do that. Now I've had my property for 5-6 years here and I love, like I said, I love it here. So short-term rentals are just like any other business in town. Okay. Like a bar, a restaurant. If they're eliminated, you eliminate someone's job, you eliminate the cleaner's job, you eliminate a lot of different things, right? So you really got to understand how that affects not just the owners, right? But everyone who services, the contractors, the painters, everybody, right? So shutting them down, like going to a bar, it's like shutting a bar down in town, say, yep, there's a bunch of people who left drunk and they got in an accident. So we're going to shut the whole bar down forever, right? I understand that. But you got to find a balance somehow, right? And so you can even just like restricting them too far, you can take like 25, 30, 40% of the revenue for somebody, right? So, but they need to be policed well. And the owners are the ones who are responsible for that. And they have to take responsibility and some things are unacceptable. People who live here should not have to be here screaming and noises and like leaves going into their yards everywhere. I understand that. Like, that's not okay, right? You have to regulate your own property. And I do. And I have properties elsewhere. We're doing this in other cities as well. So anyways, so in this situation, in my opinion, from my experience, and I'm actually representing some other people in town. I have a condo in town, right? The best thing to do is not approach this with a sledgehammer and punish everybody. Approach it with a scalpel. Find out where the problems are and deal with those problems, right? But not punish every single person who has a business here that honestly, like, will be financially, partially or fully ruined by banning or super restricting them. So, like I said, this is happening all over the place. And I want to work with the city. I want to work with the people who live here. That's important. But just from experience with other areas and other cities, like, I feel like everyone's going to do the right thing, and I hope everyone does, and I hope everyone's heard. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Something as far as the person getting swiped would be the rent owner, the renter, not the owner.
Bobby Gaunt, and I live on the Hill. And in the spirit of full disclosure, I'm also a member of the Planning Commission. Primarily, why I wanted to speak is to thank all of you. Obviously, this is a big issue. It's been a big issue for a long time. I've lived here for about 31 years now, part-time and now full-time. My husband and I at one time owned a rental. So I understand both sides of the issue from a personal point of view. And these kinds of issues are never easy. So, but it is a matter of balance. And as long as I've been associated with the city, they treat these kinds of issues exactly like this is being treated, with openness and fairness and seriousness in order to address the problem that its citizens are bringing to it. So I know about public service and I know it's hard. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you. Anybody else in the room?
Hi, I'm Nancy Kimball. I live on Upper Spear Street. I'm a neighbor of Peter. And so Peter, what you said, I would echo everything. I feel the same way. Just to give you a little background, we've only lived here for 4 years. And we used to come over here from Chicago just like many other people. And we enjoyed the town and we almost spontaneously decided to buy a house here. And I've been very happy. I love it here. But I have become increasingly concerned about the short-term rentals. Having moved here, I tried to get very involved in the community. I'm on the board for the Friends of the Blue Star Trail. I then volunteered to be on Saugatuck's recently created Parks and Public Works Committee. And so I'm very involved in the community. I'm very invested. I am such a proponent for it that I was able to convince my son, who was living in Oakland, California, that this is an awesome place to raise your children. They moved here. They now have 2 kids at Douglas Elementary. My grandkids are here. So obviously I'm very invested in the community. But I am so nervous as a homeowner on Upper Spear that my neighborhood is going to disappear and that I'm going to have rentals on each side of me because I have, frankly, we are an aging community and we have a lot of gray hair besides mine on my street. So, those houses will turn over and my neighborhood could change in a dime. We have a block party every year that is phenomenal. And we have some who are only part-time there, but most people are full-time residents. We have some snowbirds, but the people who just rent, they don't show up. And it's a neighborhood feel that I would not have if I hadn't landed where I did. And so I'm very fortunate. I think I was a little naive. I didn't realize how many rentals were in town. But if I knew when we bought what I know now, I don't think I would have picked Saugatuck. And so I think you should just think about how important is it to have residents full-time invested in the community, but don't actually have any stake in that game. And I do appreciate the fact that, people can, to me, it's no problem if you own a property, you live there and you have a little rental behind you. You're still a neighbor. But if something happens and I want to call on a neighbor and all I've got is short-term rentals surrounding me, it's not a place I want to live.
Thank you. Anyone else in the room? Okay, we'll go to Zoom. Zoom hands. iPhone.
Yeah, hello, it's Scott Dean, 544 St. Joseph Street. Full disclosure, currently serving as mayor of Saugatuck. Just want to thank the entire task force for your service to the community. You're all going to do great things and really looking forward to seeing your work going forward. So a big thank you from the city.
Thanks, Scott. Anyone else on Zoom? Okay, I think that's it then. Wanted to take a few minutes before we wrap up with any comments from task force members before we. Anyone? Well, great. Well, thank you, everybody. I thought this was okay. Yeah. I thought this was a great kickoff. Appreciate everybody's engagement on the task force and in the room and on Zoom. So do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I will make motion, Joe Clark.
Okay, Joe moved. A second?
I'll second.
Adjourn, yes. And Ann seconds it. All in favor? This is a voice vote. Aye?
Aye.
Any against? Great. Thanks, everybody.